recording. It's so lovely to see you all.
Someday, someday, no matter where you are, a solitary song is pure consolation. So sing this hopeful anthem under your breath to the best of your ability to join this human chorale, for you are not alone, but one of many singing this song at this very moment. Someday, no matter where you are, a solitary song is pure consolation. So sing this hopeful anthem under your breath to the best of your ability to join this human chorale, for you are not alone, but one of many singing this song at this very moment. There could be 100, there may be 10,000 joining this private refrain, this continuum which dares to dream. We who have committed this song to memory wear this mantra like a garland. And sharing our singing space permits us to hope against hope, to wish upon wishes, stilling inner waters to break our silence and remind us we will wake up where blue sky seems to be all God ever gave. And this promised land we heard of once is not the stuff of lullabies or happy little bluebirds. For someone somewhere sings this song, and someone somewhere smiles as they cease asking why. For sharing our singing space permits us to hope against hope, to wish upon wishes, stilling inner waters to break our silence and remind us we will wake up where blue sky seems to be all God ever gave. This promised land we heard of once is not the stuff of lullabies or happy little bluebirds, for someone somewhere sings this song, and someone somewhere smiles as they cease asking why. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Birds fly over the rainbow. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I, if happy little blue birds fly above the rainbow? Why, oh, why can't I? So good morning, Florida. It's 10 past 2 in the afternoon here, and I thought we would open with a poem of mine that I wrote in praise of the great song by Judy Garland. Sung by Judy Garland. It's called Somewhere Over the Rainbow. There's a line in that poem that I'm proud of. We who have committed this mantra to memory wear this song like a garland. And that garland has a capital G in in the written part of the poem, which is a little play on words. But I suppose that line is also, we who have committed this mantra to memory wear this song like a garland. A garland, of course, is like a ring of flowers, often around one's neck, an ornament. And anyone who has memorized anything will know that it takes a lot of work to memorize the lyrics of a song to memory, or the text of a poem or monologue to recite it from memory is a real journey, full of humility for most of us, unless one of you has a photographic memory. But I thought that I would share that because it's a poem in praise of a song, and that song has a lot to teach us. And part of the artistic journey that myself and my brother have inherited, not only from Ireland, but also from our mother Noreen and from other virtuosos we've had the pleasure and privilege to work with, is to add our own insight into a piece of art. And whether that piece of art is literary or musical, it doesn't really matter. I suppose one of the things we wanted to work with today, drop you straight in the deep end at 8 a.m. over there in Florida, deep into your creative melange, is how do we garner or work up the courage to work our own insight or present our own insight into the material that we collect. And one would think that that is a tradesman-like kind of a pragmatic thing to do. But in my experience as an artist, it's actually been a very, very vulnerable thing to do. So, for instance, learning one of the great songs, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which everybody knows the first and last lines of, but how many people know the three verses and what order they come in? And how many people have learned that song and mixed up all the verses for the first 5 or 6 times they did it publicly? I can tell you that every person who's learned that song has mixed up the verses, because the opening verse is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Well, I can't even remember the first line of the opening one. But there's Bluebirds Fly is the last one, and Skies Are Blue is the second one. And then the first one is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Way Up High is the first one. So even still, I'm shaky, and I've had that song in my memory for over 10 years. So not only do we need to, or we might desire to acquire and commit this thing to memory, how do we then take a further step and add our own insight and our own stamp, our own twist in the presentation of that art? Of course, a lot of you are collecting the great pieces of literature and the great arias and great songs and great instrumental pieces of the Western classical tradition, of jazz, of poetry, of literature. But there's a real stepping out of that world into your own self when you add your own insight. And that's the word me and my own wanted to work with today for at least the first half of this session, is insight. And how do we, collect the courage to do that? What do you think of that, Owen?
Love it. Hang on a sec. Let me just spotlight you. I want to put you in here, and then I want to put me here beside you. There we go. Love it. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about, just to give you a couple of little examples of pieces of works of art that we've encountered. And then, as Miall is saying, your interpretation of something, your insight is absolutely essential and just as valid as anybody else's. And when you hear other people's insight about things, you think, these great critics, these great experts on art, well, you're going to be those experts in the future, if not now already. So you may as well start preparing now, get over the imposter syndrome and get over the I'm too young to do that, or my opinions are worthless. You may as well just start making up your own ideas right now and getting some practice in, because you're just the same as anyone else. And actually, you've gotten a great head start with your studies and with the teachers, your professors that you've encountered, and the all the experiences, your life story that's brought you to this place already has given you an extraordinary head start to being an expert in your field. It's a few years away, but not too long, and you can call yourself an expert in your field. And already now you've undertaken this Hibernian Horizon program. You've traveled far and wide, and you've met experts abroad, and so already your curriculum vitae is growing. I was thinking of just going back to this poem that I think we worked with a long time ago, and that's the Lake Isle of Innisfree. And here's a little example of like individual insight. So, for example, I could just recite this poem for you, or I could read it, even worse, and leave it there. It's a beautiful poem. It's very inspirational. But instead, what I'm going to do is actually give you some insight and some context about this poem. And I'll tell you why I believe this poem is relevant to us right now. So it's called The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I just put it there in the chat, the Zoom chat. Lake Isle of Innisfree by William Butler Yeats, who's a great national poet of Ireland. He was at the height of his powers during the Irish independence movement in the late 1800s and the early 20th century when the Irish state was being formed. And he was a poet, a very outspoken social commentator, and was eventually appointed a senator in the Irish Parliament. So he was a poet politician. And be interesting if we had a few more of those, wouldn't it? So he was a poet politician, and he wrote this poem. He says of this poem, this was one of his earliest poems in his early 20s. And he says of this poem that it was the first time he found his own poetic voice. And he says, the Lake Isle of Innisfree is an imaginary lake. And he wrote this poem as he was walking down the street of London, Oxford Street, the busiest street in the world at the time, the center of the empire, the Fifth Avenue of its time. And he's walking down the street and he hears the sound of water in a store, in a shopfront display. There was a little water feature in this shopfront display. And in the midst of that urban cacophony, that sound breaks through and hits him in his imagination. And this poem flowed out. And it brings him back to his childhood in Ireland, to this imaginary place called the Lake Isle of Innisfree. And so what I've just done there is I found this poem and I loved this poem. And then I researched the history of the poem. And I put myself in the poet's shoes and imagined myself in his shoes walking down the street, listening to the story that he told of this poem. And then I've recounted that story to you just now. And so do you see how I took the poem that inspired me, and then I went and did a bit of research on the poem. And instead of just reading this poem, I also gave you a little bit of the story that also really hit me about that poem. So that's
So
something.
that was Yeats's actual story of, like, he recounted that. Yeah. So that
Yeah,
you're describing.
there's a very famous letter where he writes about this poem, and he says that it's the first time he found his own personal artistic voice. But I had to go and research that myself, and even say when I was researching it, and this is over a period of years too, because I had been researching it and reciting it, and then someone else, it was Patrick Heather, had a reference to that letter. So I knew about the story, and then someone else approached me and said, "Oh, I have a letter where he quoted on that." And so as you start to work with the poem and present your insights on it, other people will come and add to that. So you also have to be open and receptive to new information all the time. And so all of this information is really important. Like anything that's interesting to you is going to be interesting to someone else. So
Yeah.
you're picking up all the time these little nuggets around the work of art, and you're going to be bringing it in. So when you present that piece of art, you should always be thinking about how can you present on the context of it as well too. And
Do you know
even
what happens,
one,
Owen, to me when you say this poem is where Yeats says that he found his own voice? Then, like, subconsciously or subliminally, It's an invitation to me to find my own voice in a poem that I'm about to hear that I've never heard. That's what I feel. I feel excited.
When you start, yeah, when you start to give context and present your own insight on something, you start to ring bells in other people's minds. You're preparing their mind for this piece of work. It's doing so much, when you research and present on something. It does so much, and so it's very easy to disregard your curiosity and your own interest and just focus on Yeats, 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 and not like who am I to present my insight onto Yeats? The old imposter syndrome stuff. But actually, you make Yeats far more interesting if you tell us a bit about why you think it's interesting. It's
Mm.
actually, I personally think it's like if I was to hear Triss's response or Autumn's response on Yeats, I'm actually really listening to that almost more than the work itself. So actually, you're far more interesting. I know myself. I mean, I'm far more interesting than even I think I am because sometimes I think I'm terribly boring. And but I'm not. I'm not boring because everybody is really interesting, and your insight is actually far more interesting than the work of art itself. So yes, so I wanted to show you that I researched the history. I was telling you about it, and it gives this whole other context.
I think you touched on something really important for Inside Owner when you're presenting a piece of art. How is it relevant to us now, I think is how you put it.
Very nice. Yeah, very nice. And so, like, I threw in there when Yeats was walking down Oxford Street, the Fifth
Mm-mm.
Avenue of its time, right? So I'm making a connection there between, the center of Manhattan today and Oxford Street back then. So that's important too, is trying to, when you're talking about stuff in the past, how is it
Mm.
relevant to our context today? Because something about that work of art inspired you or drew you to it. And the reason it did is because
Mm.
it is ringing a bell with you in your life today. So being explicit about that, it's like, what is it today in our world today that this piece of work in the past speaks to? And there's a reason for that. If you want to scratch at that, you'll find it. And your opinion on that is totally valid.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, and then the other thing I love about this poem is I often work with this as you guys know at the start of things because I believe that this voice is it's talking about an imaginary island. And I believe that this is a great my insight about this poem is that it's a great way to call people into a sense of community, into a circle, that we're creating this imaginary island as we gather. And especially when people gather at the beginning of a project, it's wonderful to say, actually, we're beginning something together. We're creating this island together in community. So that's my insight into this poem is that it's a beautiful way to call people into community, that we create the Lake Isle of Innisfree together. So what I've done there again is this is my opinion and my insight, and I present that and I present it within a context. This is now where, to be honest, it gets like we've studied this and we've worked with people who are like world class at taking a piece of art and creating a sense of context and community. And that, to be honest, is actually really hard. And I'm 44. Maybe I started to study it in my late 20s. And eventually, if you keep at it, you begin to not only take the work of art and talk about why it means something to you right now in your life, that's
Mm.
difficult to do, but then to say, and everybody, this is why this work of art is here
Mm.
for us all to gather together. Now that's a really cool thing to do.
Yes.
Um, and I've worked with
It's
this poem
beautiful.
for years, and
Mm.
I've studied people who take works of art and create community and spellbind people with the work of art. And that really is that's the master stroke. Yeah.
Well, it's very vulnerable as well because there's always a chance in our heads. In the real world, it actually doesn't seem to exist, amazingly, even though on TV it does. But there's always this thing in our heads that someone's going to stand up and say, "No, you fraud. Sit down. You have no right to insight into Yeats. Sit, sit, you fool." There's that,
Charlatan.
which that's what happens on TV. But I mean, I've been around the world, I've done hundreds of gigs, and it doesn't happen. Maybe they're scared of me. I don't know.
We're called a charlatan once.
I was called a charlatan once by Chris O'Dowd. He's this really famous Irish comedian, and I met him in a bar in LA, and it was late, and he was like, "So, what do you do? You seem interesting. What do you do?" And Chris O'Dowd's a big producer, like big deal. And I was like, "Oh my God, Chris O'Dowd!" And Irish guy went to LA, made it huge, and so he goes, "And what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I recite poetry and I sing, and I tell stories about my life, and I try to present on that." And he was like, "But what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I recite poetry and I sing songs and I tell stories about my life, and I try to present on that, you know." And he said, but I mean, I'm a comedian. I make people laugh. What do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I add insight into poetry and I sing songs and I inherited lots of songs and I present them." And he's like, "What are you, a charlatan?" And then he walked away. And I was like, I suppose it's hard to describe, this thing of insight and context that we're talking about. And another great word for insight is an invitation. So we think insight is like filling up a piece of art in order to give it to you so it bursts all over you with meaning. But it's not really about that as well. You have to set up a piece of art that it invites you into it to like bring a bit of yourself. So it makes the audience do a bit of work. Now, an audience is an unbelievably forgiving thing, and whether in the live context or in a literary context, um, but they want to do a bit of work. They don't want to be underestimated. And that's one of the things I overhear myself say when I work one on one with poets and writers online. It's like, don't underestimate your reader. And me and Owen have learned that we don't need to serve up the meaning to the listener, live or anywhere. You can invite them like a really complexly into something, and they'll bring all their life experience. They're just waiting for someone to invite you into this piece that Owen's about to recite, or into Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I'll give an example of what I usually say around Somewhere Over the Rainbow after this poem. But so, Owen, do you know a jump off point at which you go from insight into the poem? Like,
Well, yeah, that's cool because of course context is everything. So it's like where are you, what time of the day, what type of audience, and the most important thing to answer that question, I would say, is how much time do I have? If I've been given a 5 minute slot, I better jump off very quickly. If I've been given an hour, well, I can really let it go and feel when I feel a certain pause has been reached. What I kind of aim for and what we've studied to working with the people we've worked with is, does a natural pause come in the presentation? So if I say something like, for example, this is the poem where William Butler Yeats found his own voice. And I'll take a breath and I'll go, okay, that's as good a place as any. And then I'll start off with it. Yeah. So I just sort of wait for a pause. But again, it takes a bit of practice to get to that place, But
and before you recite again, Owen, I can feel it in my body, and I'm sure people can as well. You really are getting to the point in your mind where you're like, is this guy going to read this poem or what? So what you're doing is actually making the audience really want the poem,
yeah.
They really want it. And at the end, it's like, dude, shut up, give me the poem. And when someone's eager for something, what happens? It's delicious. So it makes the song much more present, instead of like, this is William Butler Yeats, and you just go into it. They're like, you just walked in off the street. You're like, what was that? I don't know, dude. But so I've noticed that, and I've noticed that with the virtuosos we've worked with too. There'll be a pause, and then you'll think they're about to go into the poem, or the song, and they'll start speaking again, and you're like, oh, okay, we'll listen to some more context. But it's all really wonderful insight that's building towards something. But you're also, in a sense, teasing the listener. I don't know, is that stupid to say?
No, it's definitely building something up. And like even the things that you say are preparing the person's mind. Each person is hearing it differently, of course. So each person is going through certain things in their life at a certain time. And you might say one word like grief, for example. And then the people who are in grief at the moment are going, oh, whoa, what's he going to say about grief? Or you may say, heartbreak. Boom, someone's going through heartbreak. So you don't know what everyone's going through, but yeah, the more you can throw out there, the more you But yeah, so my insight on this poem that I work with is to talk about creating community, creating a circle.
Mm,
And then one last thing I'll share about this is I when I learn off some poems, when I learn them off by heart, I'll print them out and I'll put them on my little music stand here. I'll keep them around. And so it reminds me to, oh look, I'll try to recite it, or I'll try to learn it off by heart. And then I got this new guitar a few years ago, and I was playing it, and the sheet of the piece of paper of the poem was in front of me, and I just started to sing it. And so I came up with a song, my own setting of this poem. So that's something as well, too. Like your insight can actually extend to recreating that piece of art in your own way, responding your own way to that piece of art. And then now you've got a whole show. You've got the history of it, your own insight, the thing itself, and then perhaps something else that you created on that thing.
mm.
The whole evening. Slap an intermission in the middle of that, and you got a show. And
Call the concert, yeah, you just call it one poem, an evening of one poem. The Bono Sula one. Well, you see, and then the history, and then, but then there's also your own personal thing, like where did you first hear the poem as well, or hear the piece of art, and what were you going through maybe, when you came across it. So there's the history and there's the context, but then there's the really really personal one. Like I came across this when I was going through a chapter where I was going through this, and this meant so much to me. People love that. And when you juxtapose the history of Yeats walking down the Fifth Avenue of his time, which was in London in the early 20th century, versus when you came across it and what you were going through, people are now, you've got the two antennaes of the audience. They're like, okay, they're ready. Because I've also gone through grief, or I've also done this or that, because we've all have the same story.
and on that note, for example, I would say, yeah, on this, that my first approach to this poem, I knew it as a kid. It's a very famous poem in Ireland, and but I came across it during COVID, during the lockdowns of COVID. And so this poem talks about aloneness and solitariness. But my insight on it was that it was a yearning for community, actually, that there was a loneliness that was yearning for community, or preparing itself for the arrival of community. That community, in a way, happens after something, an experience that exists in this poem. So that was all during COVID time, and I didn't like COVID lockdowns at all. I had a terrible time and hated being restricted in travel, specifically over and back to Ireland. Because I live here in Western New York, and loved the freedom of being able to go back to Ireland anytime I wished. And when that was removed, when that opportunity was removed, I recognized how severe, or how important that aspect was to my life, that I'd taken for granted up until that time.
Mhm.
So now you see, I've just told you a little bit of personal story, and you're listening, and you're, oh yes, what was I doing through COVID?
Yeah, like what am I taking for granted in my life? All of these things.
And oh,
Yeah.
see, yeah, and of course we're telling you all this because we really want to hear your own insights as to what happened to you in Ireland. And this whole experience, leading up to going to Ireland, and since the week since you've been back, and what that's all been like. So I will sing this. When is he going to sing this?
I know. Come on, Teed.
Oh.
Ah. Owen, will I recite it, and then you sing it?
Beautiful.
How about
Beautiful.
that?
Please.
The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there, of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, and a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dripping from vales of morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and midnight full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, Whether standing on the roadway or on the pavement's grey, I hear it in the deep heart's core.
I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, and a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee loud glade, in the bee loud glade, in the bee loud glade. I will have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, slow like the veils of the morning, to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all the glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evenings filled with the linnet's wings, with the linnet's wings, with the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping in low sounds by the shores. When I'm on the roadway or on the pavement's grey, I hear it in the deep heart's core, in the deep heart's core, in the deep heart's core.
Groovy, man, groovy.
Groovy.
There's an interesting, there's a lot of mention as well of like the natural world in that. And, you know, he talks about the crickets singing and midnight full of the linnet's wings. And the linnet was a very popular, it's a very popular bird with a very sweet song in this part of the world, but I think they're all over the world. And they, in the 1800s and early 1900s, it was very common to have caged birds. You know, that classic bird cage, the brass one, like that was, you know, really an image from the 19th century, the 1800s, where it was very normal to keep caged birds, especially in the bigger houses, or if you were upper class, you would keep a bird. And that was seen as kind of a connection to the agricultural society that you had just come from in living memory. Because keep in mind, the Industrial Revolution was something that happened in England and Ireland pretty recently. So you had all of these very proud farming families suddenly completely disconnected from their family traditions, their family professions. Everything was outsourced to tradesmen and hundreds of acres, and everything became possible at that time. So a lot of the upper classes were kind of sitting around, and this idea of the Victorian person kind of just swanning around a big mansion, and not working for a living, became in our minds like Downton Abbey kind of vibe. And so the linnet was seen as a very sweet song, but from a caged animal. And the linnet keeps coming back in all the poems and songs of the time, that a person who's lonely would be, singing the linnet's song. And I actually did some research into the linnet as well, because I was working with this poem myself, and I didn't see that my brother working with the poem was any reason for me to not get stuck in as well. You see, that's the thing as well. Don't worry about it. Everyone's going to have their own thing to say about it. But when I started Googling about the linnet as well, and I was reading a biography of W.B. Yeats at the time as well, or at least a part of one, because he was involved in this other arts club that I was reading about. And the linnet is called Linnaeum cannabisum because it used to love the hemp seed, and the hemp seed gives rise to the marijuana plant. But hemp, as you probably know, is a really strong agricultural fibrous plant, and it was used to make rope, and it was used to make clothing, and but it was very fond of that. And if you look further into the history, agricultural history, in the 17 and 1800s, in Ireland and England, it was necessary, compulsory, if you will, for a farmer to keep 10% of their agricultural land for hemp plants. So, and that hemp was then used for or textiles and all practical things, because it was a really handy, strong plant for making things with. So the linnet would often flock to that part of every farm, believe it or not, had cannabis plants growing on it, as they probably don't grow very well here, but anyway, that's what they did. And so I myself was reading about W.B. Yeats at the time, and W.B. Yeats, he was a pretty mystical dude. So my insight into that poem is that evenings full of the linnet's wings could be a reference to cannabis within this poem from the 1900s. So that's completely my insight, which I don't offer to everybody, but it's probably completely untrue. He's probably using it in the poetic, poignant sense, but I mean, I'm not saying. I mean, W.B. Yeats, he was an adventurous guy. Let's put it that way. He try everything once,
At least one. And
at least once.
his life is actually wild. Like, yeah,
Oh, his biographies are hilarious.
won't get
Yeah,
into it. We'll get cancelled if we started talking about Yates. Like, he's wild. Um, but that's beautiful. So when you start to explore the history yourself, certain things will come out at you, and don't disregard those. If you're seeing something,
yeah.
and if you think it's something, like, it is something, So that's what we really want to say. So, um, what?
The thing, just to touch on my somewhere over the rainbow thing, when I present that to a group, I often present it in the context of we grew up, me and my brother grew up, and our parents were great friends with the monks in a monastery near where we lived. And in the Benedictine monastery that is, they all wear black habits or black kind of cloaks, and they go to church 4 times a day. Once at 6 a.m., once at midday or 12 p.m., once at 6 p.m., and once at 8:05. And they are called the offices, the 4 offices of the day. And that I always remember growing up that my father telling us that wherever you are in the world, or at every time all over the world, that the Benedictine monks and all religious orders are all singing at the same time the same pieces of chant and the same prayers all over the world at the same time. And this as a kid was really quite trippy to me, because it made a pretty boring mass more exciting to a child's mind, because it's like, wow, this is going on all over the world, loads of dudes going, oh. But it made it much more beautiful, and it made me realize that actually this is a return of humanity to certain musical and prayer material. And that's really where I got the inspiration to write that poem, Over a Rainbow, which invites you into a continuum, something we can sing, because there's always somebody somewhere in the world singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It's like Danny Boy or something. So someday, no matter where you are, a solitary song is pure consolation. Sing this hopeful anthem under your breath to the best of your ability to join this human chorale, for you are not alone, but one of many singing this song at this very moment. There could be 100, there may be 10,000 joining this private refrain. And of course, Summer of the Rainbow is a song one sings to oneself. It's a healing thing, you know. It's a very inspirational and merciful song to sing to yourself. To join this human refrain for you, a continuum which dares to dream. We who have committed this mantra to memory wear this song like a garland. Sharing our singing space permits us to hope against hope, to wish upon wishes, stilling inner waters to break our silence and remind us we will wake up where blue sky seems to be all God ever gave. So it's really about entering into a private space where you're singing to yourself to heal yourself, but with the mind that everyone else is doing it as well. And also then it's an invitation to learn the lyrics, you know, and really to learn the lyrics of any song. And I believe in the healing characteristics of that process, you know. So that's kind of some of the, and that's a uniquely personal, that doesn't have any history of Judy Garland or, you know, history of when the song was written or you know, what box office the movie made or, you know, anything like that. That's just a purely personal thing. And part of insight, before we move on, part of giving your own insight is noticing in your life the things that could be interesting to contextualize certain things. So when my dad said that, and I realized that, oh, that's where I got the idea. So you have to tag that on to the piece of art in your mind. Like that's the story. So there's another link in the chain. You're like coming up with stories from your own life and hooking them on to different parts of your own artistic presentation, your own curation. Curation is a great word. To curate is to present, but it's also to collect material in order to present. And all of us are curating all the time. And it's possible to curate songs and novels and monologues and poems, but it's also possible to curate stories from your own life that are universal, that mean something to a lot of people and invite someone to contemplate something. So that's it. Just a bit of courage and the right type of eye, and suddenly our own lives become signposts and invitations for someone. And then you throw in a poem or a song on top of it, and you've got magic in the room.
Lovely. Um, so we're going to have a chat. Let's no small talk. Let's go to a work of art or an experience or a song or a piece of writing or something that happened specifically during this Hibernian Horizon process and give the person your insight into it. Okay. So no small talk. Go straight to the art. We don't need any of that. Let's do that. And I'm going to throw the professors and ourselves into conversation as well, too.
So
Uh,
now maybe just like choose a piece of art or a book or a
well,
poem or a song that
Well,
you love,
something,
and
something,
then over
something
here.
that's something that's come to you during this, like something in Ireland or some specific thing within this process. Well, you can if you want. You can pick anything if you want, but ideally something that you've experienced during this process. Yeah, something that perhaps has entered into your autoethnographic mind as you have taken part in this process. So here we go. I'm going to give us 15 minutes, so 7 minutes for one person and then seven for the other, and just let one person go first and then the second person go second, and don't really interrupt or anything, just let them go for it. And 7 minutes can go by very fast when you start talking about this kind of stuff. And if the other person isn't in your room or whatever, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. Okay, see you in a minute. Back, everyone, welcome back, everyone. So uh want to hear from you. Tell me what was going on. Professor Riley, I have to call on you. So
Of
lovely
course.
to see you. I wish we were just hanging out here for a nice walk. Oh my God, a walk down by the River Shannon. How are you doing?
What? I'm doing so great. And it's so funny that you should mention that because I was in a room with Maggie and I said to her, the thing that stood out for me the most was the River Shannon and just totally. And just walking back and forth across that every day and stopping to look at the swans and see the water. And the peacefulness of the water, whereas the river is such a big river, but at that point it's a haven for those swans and those little babies. And then watching the people go back and forth each day, and then having that mirrored by the Irish Academy with that wonderful piece of art that's on the wall there, depicting the goddess. Uh, and I said that I been looking at that photograph that we took in front of the academy of all the students lined up. I've been looking at that a lot lately because I used it in a presentation that I just did recently. So that whole just visual of the river and the building just holds so many memories and such a deep feeling of Ireland. It's the one that I go back to in my mind all the time.
What was the presentation?
It was a conference in Milwaukee. It was an international conference called Improving University Teaching. So it was university professors from all around the world. And myself and another professor from the music department did a presentation about the marginalization of the humanities, versus STEM topics in university teaching. So we were all about saying, you know what, we need each other and we need to infuse STEM teaching with the humanities. And it's actually already been done and very successfully, notably at UWF. So it was great to be able to use that picture as an example and the power of music.
Beautiful. Wow. Talk about insight, utilizing the experience into other contexts. That's our father would be delighted to hear all this. It's so rich, my goodness. Anybody else? Let's see. I'm gonna call on someone because there's always the terrible Zoom awkward silence. So I'm just gonna see, who do I see? Autumn, come on.
Hi. So I had Dr. Dunn, and we just talked a lot about how we felt about the trip, and I told her a little bit about what I did my creative writing project on. I called it the magic of things because that's what this trip really gave back to me, was the ability to find the magic in everyday things. Not everything can be as magical as Ireland, obviously, but there's still things in my everyday life that can be magical and give me magic.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much. Lee, come on, how's it going? Tell us everything.
Oh, hi. So I was in a breakout room with Ava, and we really talked. I think one thing I kind of took from this trip is really just taking things in, like living in the moment. It's kind. Gosh, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. Uh, yeah. So live in the moment. Don't dwell in the past. Just take things as they are. It's
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And let's see, who else do I see here? Emma. Oh no, Emma just sneezed, I think, and I just called on her name. Oh no, hang on. Come on, can you tell us?
If we could have people, maybe if a piece of music or a moment stood out to you as well, or a piece of art or a piece of creative kind of philosophy sticks out to you from your time in Ireland, you can mention that as well. But I really love how people are sharing how personal and useful it's been.
Okay. So I was in a breakout room with Gabby, and we talked about a bunch of different things. But we were talking about primarily like how to like take our trip with us, and like keep it with us in like a safe place, but not like get stuck in it and in the past of it, because we've gone and we've experienced it and now we're back. Well, Gabby's still in Salzburg, but like, so how to keep the good of it. But Gabby said it was really interesting about not romanticizing it. But like keeping it and having it stay with you, but not drag you down either. And then we both talked about like some of the pieces we really liked from our respective stuff. So I talked about the one play. I want to say her name is
Yeah, Anne Blake. Yes, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Her play and how she used like her own experiences and her art to do something like really meaningful, which I feel like for a lot of artists is the end goal, is to create meaning in someone's life. And so it's nice to see how like tangible hers was. I don't know where I was going. I'm so sorry.
No, absolutely. That's exactly it. Yeah. That's exactly the insight there with Anne's work, is to see, and with Mike's work too, how someone brings their own personal story into their art. It's extraordinary. Gabby's still in Salzburg. Did you just say that? Gabby?
Salzburg.
Salzburg, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I am still in Salzburg.
What's going down? What's going on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, cool. Okay, sorry. My Wi-Fi like completely shut out for a second. Yeah, I'm still here. We have our final concert tomorrow, and we're going to an opera tonight. Sing a Mozart opera, but I really miss Ireland a lot. And I miss like just the experience of everything, like being with all creative, like-minded people and like enjoying the music like it's the wind, if that makes it like any sense. Like, am I still
Yeah, you're still here.
We can hear you loud and clear. Yeah, yeah.
okay?
Maybe
like, what has Salzburg done to you, Gabby?
I don't know.
The German.
I'm so tired.
Yeah.
Ich bin müde.
Müde. That's beautiful. Hear the music like the wind.
I think it was enjoy the music like the wind. I think you might have said it. I can't remember, but I know what you mean. Yeah, in our breakout room, I was with Jade and Brooke, and we were talking about like the communication on stage. Jade mentioned, like how that was really inspiring. How when people got on, like they were looking around, and there was just kind of this sense of vivacity or like informality to the presentation of the work. So I thought that was a really lovely thing to hear people bring back, and that helped to go to Gabby's point. That helped her enjoy, the music, and get away from the technique and and Brooke was saying they felt at home in the music too. So.
Angie, how's it going?
Hello, it's going well. I had Abby with me, and it was really fun. And we had a very lovely conversation. And we had her talk about two songs that stuck out to us. For me, it was A Nini, which is a little lullaby about the birds and the Fae and how they would come take the little children, but the children were actually the birds, and it was just a distraction. But then that just led to deeper conversations about, well, like just retaining those songs and making them kind of ours, or at least for me. I want to take this song with me and then later teach it to other people as well. And then maybe my children or my dog. But then that also led to just not getting like, for me, one of my fears is like, we have the Irish mojo right now, and the like, oh my gosh, the motivation and the creativity of like coming back from a trip and wanting to share things and posting pictures. But then I'm like, as the semester goes on or life goes on, I don't want to get so stuck in my everyday routine to where I kind of forget that motivation. And so Abby was like, it's just about being conscious of it and reminding yourself, but also enjoying the moment of your everyday things and uh presentations. And I have my junior recital coming up. Woo! So just, not being fearful and just having that freedom of making the songs ours and inviting the community and just giving your all to the song. And that's something that I really loved watching and being a part of over there in Ireland, how everybody just gave themselves wholly to the songs and they became one with the audience as well. And that's how I want to be able to perform, hopefully. I cried so much over there.
Wonderful. And yes, you can do that. You will do. You have, now that you've said it, you can't go back. And with all of you, as presentations or as papers emerge, the good question is, how can you put yourself in there? Where can you put in your own insight? Might you say a few words before you sing that song, or might you put a few sentences in of reflection that you mightn't have? And does that feel courageous? Does that feel anxious? Does that make you feel anxious? Or to lean into that reluctance as well is a great word. You feel reluctant to do it. Very often, reluctance and anxiety, shyness, those are all actually really good indicators that you're on the right path. Because if you start feeling too comfortable, that's probably not your path. It's probably someone else's that you're mimicking, that you feel you should be doing. So it's fun to say, as you approach these recitals, these presentations, these papers, how would you put yourself in there a little bit? And you don't have to go all in, just one little line, one little sentence, one little phrase is all that's necessary. Abby, how are you doing?
Yay, I'm doing great. Angie was my partner, and she just went. The song that stood out to me most was Out of the Window, and it's talking about these two young lovers. And the way that I interpret it is from the young man's point of view, and he's um, very in love with his young woman, and he's talking about how the sunlight sparkles on her, and it's not going to be long till our wedding day. The dew falls on the meadow, moths fill the night. It's just very poetic, and I love it. But then the very last line, after he's talking about all this love that they have for each other and all this looking forward to the future, she up and runs off with another man. And to me, it what it means to me right now in my current state of life is to have joy and excitement and look ahead and be excited for the future, but also know that there's an uncertainty that lies ahead. And I think don't be afraid of that uncertainty, and don't be anxious, and don't dwell on what might happen, either good or bad. Kind of what others have said already, be in the moment. I think learn from the past, but don't dwell on it. Be in the moment, look forward to the future, but don't let it grab you, and don't let it hold you down and give you these feelings of anxiousness, nervousness. I don't know. I think, yeah, just live in the moment, be prepared, but don't let what you don't know determine how you embrace the moments that you're living in, I guess, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Well, now imagine just singing the song then, just after what you said. That would be like, yeah, I'm ready to hear that.
When we talk about insight as well, we are all sharing different techniques of how to get beyond ourselves, and a great way of beginning something that you don't know what you're going to say, but getting yourself into it is, this piece is an invitation to ... So this thing that I'm about to perform is not just a one-way avenue. It's actually an invitation for us all to see ourselves within it. So may you write this down now and take it into your performative careers or your literary careers, that to open your yourself with an invitation creatively is, or to dislocate the piece from yourself into a shared environment where indeed it becomes an invitation for us all to do something, is that's a great way in, one of many.
A
But
little, yeah, like a little prompt, like an AI
mm,
prompt. You can just say, this piece is an invitation to,
and
as you
then just
say,
and just
to
just
be
yeah.
open to what were you talking about? Certainty or uncertainty in life, and being and living in the moment. And um lovely. Jade, do you want to say hello?
Hello. Um, Something that really stood out on the trip that I just think about if I could remember anything, it was our trip to the little hidden castle. Because in that moment, I felt a kind of shift in myself, and I felt like I actually enjoyed something that was fun. And the whole trip was great, but in that moment, I allowed myself to laugh and to do things that I wasn't so certain of, but I had people pushing me, but it was it was just fun, and it just reminded me to that I should enjoy things rather than finding a reason not to enjoy.
Mm.
So, but it was like those last few hours that just really was like what I think about how to enjoy.
Mm,
Thank you.
beautiful.
There's nothing like a hidden castle, I won't ask what happened.
Um, let's see, who do I
Hidden castle.
see? Maggie, how you doing?
Oh, I didn't know you could ask me to unmute. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing
This
great.
is just so nice to see everyone, hear everyone's feedback. It's just so beautiful.
So in my group, I had Professor Riley, and we were talking about the River Shannon, as he mentioned, and how it's super nice, and how I probably didn't appreciate it as much while I was there, because now I'm like, man, I wish I could take another walk there. And I was talking about how all of the local vegetation and the flowers feel so much different than from here. My dad kind of does that for a living. He looks at like the wetlands and does like land surveys and that kind of stuff. So he's really into that. And all the time when we're walking, he'll be able to identify like the scientific names of a bunch of the local plants and stuff. But oftentimes when we go on vacation, it's cool to see him be like super stumped. And this is something I haven't seen. I'm not familiar with this. And that's how I felt when we were driving around places in near Loch Gur, because there were a lot of different trees and wildflowers and stuff that I had never seen before. And that's something that I took away with me when we went into Limerick. I bought a little book of the local wildflowers just so I could remember them and have some pictures to use. I
Beautiful.
mean, the grass really is greener over there. It's kind of crazy. I don't know.
Were there any trees in particular that kind of stood out to you as unusual, or
I don't know. Your oak trees are kind of cooler.
why is that?
Why is that? Well, you were saying that like some of the oak trees at Loch Gur were kind of older than our whole country. So I was like, oh,
It's true.
I've got this great book here, Ireland's Trees
ooh.
by Neil McCutter. Myths, legends, and folklore. So all in the Celtic imagination and in every ancient wisdom tradition, the specific trees and plants and herbs have a very specific meaning and symbolism and wisdom and healing too, because believe it or not, all of our pharmaceuticals actually come from plants and trees. And of course, we think they just come in a little bottle, but they actually come from trees. So, and the ancients knew this too. They knew that if you had a certain ailment, this particular herb would heal it. And then there's a whole type of folklore and mythology and symbolism around each of the trees. So if the oak tree was standing out to you, Maggie, there's a good reason why it was. So what I'd invite you to do is to research the oak in Celtic mythology and what the oak meant. And I'll give you a quick one about the oak. Um, in the Irish language, it's dar, D-A-R, dar, and the oak tree. That word is a very important and ancient word. The word druid comes from it. The oak tree was considered the king of the forest. It represented leadership and the highest form of human leadership in the world. Like the best leader was supposed to emulate the oak tree. And one of the lessons that the oak tells us is if you look up through an oak tree, there's lots of space for light to come through. Some trees you look up and it's dark. It's like you're in an umbrella and you can't see the light at all. But the oak tree leaves space between its leaves for the sunlight to pass through it and allow vegetation underneath it to also grow. So that's just one of the lessons of leadership, that idea of kingship or leadership being generous and open and allowing sunlight to pass through it and not hogging it all for yourself. But there's loads of other cool things about the oak tree. So again, that's just an example of if there's something that is like the River Shannon as well too. There's great mythology around that river itself. And Shona is the goddess who fell into the Shannon River. So you could Google the mythology around the River Shannon. It's a fascinating story. And that's what that mosaic is all about. That big mosaic was all about the story of the goddess falling into the pond and that bubbling up and creating the River Shannon. So there's a reason why that is sticking out to you. And it's your job to discover why that's important to you in your
Yes, Abigail, you mentioned as well a line in that poem or in that song, Out of the Window, which I don't know the song, but you mentioned the moths were in the air, and you should Google the symbolism of moth as well. The moth is a very, very rich symbolic creature in all cultures, actually.
We have a very special guest.
Oh my God. Who is it?
Maestro McKern. Maestro
Oh
McKern.
my God.
Oh, he's gone.
There he is. Oh my
I'm
God.
so sorry. Here I am.
That's completely fine. It's
Professor,
good.
are you in your storage unit?
Yes.
You know, I moved my office around, so now my scenery is not nearly as used to look out the window. Now it's looking at the bottom of bookshelves.
Well,
Oh, it's the bookshelves. Oh, cool. Great.
you're like the oak, Professor McKern. You're giving your office away to the younger generation.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in the hallway.
Generously letting the light pass through your leaves.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Giving the corner office to someone undeserving.
What I miss?
Loads, man. Man, you'll miss the whole thing
We're
practically.
talking about insight into your experience, the deeper meaning behind
Yes.
what happened. Perhaps there's a couple of words, a few pearls of wisdom that you would scatter amongst us swine, Professor.
We're talking about how, when you're about to present a piece of art, how do you contextualize it in order to find the invitation within it for the listener?
Wow, that's heady on a Monday morning. I think it's first of all, I think for myself, that whole experience in Ireland, even though I was sort of oblique to what the students were doing, I thought, I spoke of this as we were wrapping up, but what I was so sort of impressed or moved by was in the midst of the experience, the people that we met there made it so personal to us. And so I thought it was a way to learn how to make art in a way that is honest and without ego. That's what impressed me the most, is we're all struggling with, you want to make good grades, you want to sing it perfectly. But the spirit of the art that was created at the Blas Festival started from a personal place, not a place of ego. And I think any artist that is sort of finding their way, they need to find their own true, clear voice, which you guys have seemed to have done so elegantly. It's the part I loved about it. I just thought it was so honest and truthful and real, and a pursuit of something that was internal rather than external is the thing that I keep carrying away from it.
Love it. Yeah. And it's so interesting. I find too that that's the thing that um when you see it, you're just totally engrossed, aren't you? It's just
Absolutely.
instantly arresting. You can't help it, and it catches you off guard. And then I often think to myself, why can't I just do that with everything all the time? It's
Well, yeah.
Because you
why is
don't
it
put in as
not
much
easy?
work.
Why is it not easy to do that? Tell me.
Yeah, that is the question, isn't it? That really is the question.
Well, it's because we're dedicating hours and hours and hundreds and thousands of hours, like this one. We've dedicated to the craft of trying to make this the transmission of a performance, like the fine tuning, like of the intentionality of presenting something, to open someone's ears unbeknownst to themselves. That's what we're talking about with insight and context, whether it's an aria or a poem or a chapter of a novel. Like I remember when Donal Ryan, that lecturer, the literary guy, on the last day or one of the last days, presented to us, and he spoke about this poem before he read it, and he contextualized really really well, um, and that's really what we can do in a musical sense as well. That we think because it's a musical piece we have to get up and present it, or because it's not our piece that we have to just get up and present it. But actually, there's more strings to our bow that are intuitive and experiential. And if we can just find that courage to focus the energy and find the invitation through symbolism of the oak or the moth or any symbol, the linnet, or through our own experience, that really not only opens the audience's ears, but it opens our own to our own magnificence and virtuosity.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. And it's interesting because I started reading A Spinning Heart, his book, and he's right when he said that he started writing in the voice of his what he knows, and it really is. I mean, it is in a unique style, but it works perfectly. And finding any good artist has to find their own. I mean, there's loads of what you just said. You got to work, you got to practice, you have to, you know, there's a blue collar side of art, right? You just have to do it. You got to put the time in. You have to, it all can't be super cerebral. But then on top of it, in being informed of your own experience, which I think you guys have done so well. You took what your parents started and then, contextualized it amongst yourself and made it your own, which is why you guys are interesting, right? Because you took what you know and experienced and then made your own sort of path. And I that's what I loved about, or I'm liking about Donal Ryan's writing. It's very authentic. And it's funny because when I read it, I hear his accent, from that day. And for me, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just sort of interrupting and now speaking, but I have to really balance trying to create some art in this new administrative, task-oriented job that I have. And there's real nuance in communicating yourself amongst a lot of people using the stuff that I've learned as an artist as opposed to just someone that answers emails, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Just blast out an aria in the middle of
Yeah.
Yeah,
random. Oh.
that's right. When I'm angry, I just, stand up and sing.
Just scare the hell
Yeah.
out of it.
Lovely.
How was the rest of your retreat with David White?
It
Oh,
all went very well. Yes, I headed off early, and Owen joined me later, and it was yeah, a group of 30 really beautiful people. Yeah, And in the mornings, David would, he's a man in his maybe mid-60s, and he presents poems in the morning. The fire is lit and we all pile into this cottage by the bay on Galway Bay and listen to him speak. And what he does is in the morning he'll just stand there and then he'll go straight into a piece of his or somebody else's. Actually, there's a poem I'm committing to memory at the moment, and he did this one morning. It's a very short poem by a woman, a Russian poet called Anna Akhmatova. And he didn't speak too much on it, but the poem is "A land not mine, a land not mine, still forever memorable. The waters of its ocean chill and fresh. Sand on the bottom whiter than chalk, and the air drunk like wine. Late sun lays bare the rosy limbs of the pine trees. Sunset in the ethereal waves. I cannot tell if the day is ending, or the world, or if the secret of secrets is inside me again. Sunset in the ethereal waves, I cannot tell if the day is ending, or the world, or if the secret of secrets is inside me again.
Cool.
That's how we'll open a morning, you know, and everyone's just like, yeah, you know, because
Yeah.
it doesn't mean everyone knows what I mean when I say that, you know, but what it means, nobody knows.
Yeah.
So that's that's a power of poetry. Now that's translated from Russian. So she's almost the national poet of Russia. So Anna Akhmatova, Akhmatova.
And as well,
It's just a wonderful little poem.
Professor,
Nice.
and I know your time is limited with us. Will you stick around for a while, or do you have to?
I just have a meeting at 10, but then I'm going to pat back on at 11. So
I'm just going to take this chance to share something with you. I'll go around to the rest of you after this, but I wanted to share. We had our friend Shane Serrano take some video while you were there. You might have noticed on one of the days, and here's the first draft of that. So this isn't finished, but I wanted to show it to you now. And it came out really well. So this is just the first draft. So there'll be things kind of cut and added, and it's not colored yet. But we put some music on it as well too. And if there's any feedback you have on this, please, you can let me know either privately or publicly. And I'll share this with us now. Let's see. Here we go. And can you see that?
I can.
Okay, here we go. Hopefully this will work out. Five.
To be able to learn directly from these experts is something that the students have found actually deeply personal. The style of teaching is something that I think I will actually take and start to reflect on and include in my approach to teaching.
We, I think, all felt very comfortable that we were going to a place that was going to be important in our students' lives and quite frankly in the faculty's lives. So we've had a very easy time. It was a seamless transition to get from Pensacola to here, and we've made memories that'll last a lifetime.
Embrace it. Embrace every single moment. Come here with an open mind, open arms. Discover a new part of yourself that you didn't think that you had.
Hibernian Horizon is very different to the average study abroad program. This experience isn't just removed from what they do on the campus. We've gathered together already a few times online to prepare them for this experience, where they have been exposed to the music and the song and the writers that they're experiencing here in Ireland during this week. When they arrive here in Limerick, they know what they're seeing and they know what to expect, and this is the culmination of that program.
From the moment we got off the plane and heard Noreen singing in the chapel, I knew that it was going to be such a transformative experience for me, and that it was.
And every student has their own room and a private bathroom, and the faculty have their own faculty apartments.
The apartments are gorgeous. Knowing that the River Shannon is a 5-minute walk away from you, And being able to open the window at night and feel the breeze and listen to people practicing their instruments as you're going to bed, and that makes it really, really hard to want to go home.
There is a whole suite of events and workshops and classes, lectures. Everyone is encouraged to take part in an Irish dance, in Irish language lessons, in lectures from experts and academics here in the Academy, and guest lecturers as well.
Hibernian Horizon is really geared toward the creative or the performing arts. It's a way for a student to step into Ireland. We visit some sacred sites at the beginning of the week before we begin our registration and enrolment here at Blas Summer School. Blas is the Irish for taste or accent in the Irish language, and it's been a very prestigious summer school in Ireland running for 30 years now.
It allows students and faculty to get a small taste of what we do here at the Irish World Academy, and I guess more generally, a small taste of Irish culture. I think one of the things that really struck me about this group when they came is how well prepared they were, the care that they had all taken to understand what they were coming for, what their vision of their time in Ireland was about. By the time they arrived, it was as if we already knew them.
We bring in the very best of tutors in terms of traditional song and dance and music. And I think speaking to a lot of the tutors, they're saying actually we're learning as much from the students as they're learning from us.
As the director of school music at UWF, this has been an incredibly beneficial program for us for two reasons. Number one, it was so seamlessly organized, and number two, the intrinsic artistic value that I feel that myself, our faculty, and our students have received. I've never quite had an experience like it.
Each one of those concerts that first day made me tear up at some point because the music was just so powerful, and it felt like all of the musicians put their heart and soul into every note they played. And then getting to learn from such incredible musicians these songs that have such a rich history, and finding our own connection with these songs was so powerful.
It has taken me away from the score and has really allowed me to just be and to just make the music come from within.
One of the things that's really important for us about Blas is that it's always a connection for potential students who want to come and study with us for postgraduate programs. So very often we have students come and have the Blas experience here. They're maybe not sure if Ireland is the right choice for them for postgraduate study, and they come and experience the atmosphere in the Irish World Academy, and then a few years later we see them arrive for our master's programs in Irish traditional music performance or in Irish dance or ethnomusicology. We do like to think of Blas as well as a shop window, as it were, for students who are curious about Irish traditional music and who want to learn more.
The material that's being transmitted, they're actually learning the way in which the teacher is transmitting it. And they're being inspired to know that life is not just one professional track, that there are many ways in which the experience of education is brought into our lives. Education is about the process and about the deep transformation that occurs, not only in the student, but also in the teacher themselves. It's about the aspiration that we take that transformation and share it with others and try to leave this world a little better than we found it.
The truth is, I loved every single element of it. I'm so very grateful. I know that all of these things are things I'm going to carry with me forever.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, there'll be one or two changes, but it might be a little shorter, but that's it. Thank you all so much for helping us.
Of course. Listen, by the time we try to come back in 2 years, it'll be sold out. There'll be no room for us.
No.
Hold our spot.
We will. Oh, it'll be so wonderful to continue this work. Yeah, thank you so much. Which we will continue this work now it'll be 5 o'clock my time, which means it will be 11 o'clock your time, I think.
Yeah, great. We'll we can we'll end this session now and join again
but we'll hear from the people who didn't share as well, Owen, at the beginning of the next session, will we? So
that's right. And
I don't know who those people are, but
we'll have more we'll have another breakout conversation as well too, and also hear any ideas you may have about any inspiration for a presentation or sharing this experience with others or with the campus in future. Perhaps Professor Dunn might have some ideas about that too, or not. But we might talk about that, and have a couple of more breakout rooms as well too. So have a nice break.
We have a special guest in our second session.
Oh, and
we've
a very special guest, a surprise guest. I'm not going to tell you who it is because they wanted to be a surprise.
Yes.
I wonder who that could be. Okay. Any questions or anything now? Anything we can answer? Great. It was so great to see you all. Have a nice break, and we'll see you in an hour and 10. Yeah. Great. Bye, guys.